Well, welcome to Blue UK Jazz Dance. This is my father. My father died, people, on the 7th of November, 1:30 in the afternoon. This is in loving memory of him. This is obviously put together for a funeral service. My father was a very, very dignified man. He taught me to live with quiet dignity. He came with dignity. He died with dignity. And what I do, Rebirth of the Cool, when I talk about me sharing my legacy had come from my parents. My parents had been individuals, contributed to my life, socially, physically, intellectually, culturally, emotionally, spiritually, to have better opportunities than themselves. Do you understand? My parents got betrayed by the UK in coming to Britain in 1961. They both came at the same time. They were told lies about Britain. When people first came and they saw the houses, they thought they were factories. They were educated to believe that everything looked like the palace. Have you got that? So this is my father, 29th of March, 1935. I'm going to give you insight to him. A lot of people talk about me being an artist. It's quite funny. They don't realize, they thought, when I tell people I'm an artist, they assume that I learned to be an artist from the schools. I didn't. Many African diaspora young people are taught pre-art education, pre-dance education, pre-emotional intelligence education, pre-reliance leadership education. Our parents tried to make us as self-sufficient from the day one we come because they know the hardships they're going to face. They need to get as much knowledge into us as early as possible because we can stand up on our own feet. We have positive hobbies, activities that we engaged in when they're not there. Now, this is my father. Boom, you can see a nice picture of him there. Very much into fashion. Now, my father was a farmer. Jamaica is a farming land. My dad used to plant tobacco. My father was a farmer. If you want to know his proper trade, he was called a farmer. When he came to this country, my father's trade was called labourer. Do you understand? It's an amazing story when people talk. So when people talk to me, I told my father was not a labourer. My father was a farmer. But when he came here, there wasn't opportunities from farming here. Do you understand? Right. He went to America. He lived there for a while, from 1955 to 61. He saw what civil rights looked like. He saw what it was like to live in the South because that's where he was. Do you understand? This is my father. He was an artist. Here he is. My father did creative textile. He was not only that, he was interior designer, trainer. He actually taught me his skills. Yeah? He transferred his skills to creative textiles. Yeah? He went back to college and got qualification in creative textiles. He was in competitions for it. That's where I got it from. This is my father. See how handsome he is? Beautiful hair. Very, very focused man. Quiet man with quiet dignity. Now, I told you he was in America. This is a photograph of my father in America. Okay? This is a photograph. He was there from 55 to 61 working. This is a picture of my father. That's him there. Now, this was him. Many African Americans, West Indians, were in America. Remember, they were taken there. So it's important that people understand. So when they talk about the British are cousins to the Americans African Americans are our cousins. Do you understand? We have links to them. People assume that we don't have links to the Caribbean. They're our cousins. I have relatives there. Do you understand? It's important people understand that all over that. Anyway, cut long story short, this is what was done in memory of my father. Here he is. Here's a prime example. There's a proper picture of my father doing his art. Creative textiles. People assume that African diaspora people, African Caribbean people, we have nothing to do with that. And people talk to me in that way. I thought, if you really did know. And so, instead of me saying, if you really did know, I decided to do a project called Rebirth for the Cool. I identified a long time before I went to school, I was a prolific artist in my primary and secondary school. You have to see my projects, my history projects were all 3D. I wanted to become an aircraft pilot, aeronautical engineer. You have to see my projects. Nobody's projects were as big as mine in my primary school or secondary. Because for a very young age, we were building bogies, go-karts and racing them. That was serious business. We're building kites. We're designing clothes. They were the type of things we were very much encouraged. Not only us, every culture was being encouraged. You had Meccano, because that was the era. I was born in 64. That was the era before that, 50s, was all about innovation, being creative, being independent thinking. Get your children into doing activities and development. In the 50s, when DIY came out, dads were teaching the sons a lot of things. They were passing on knowledge, crafts to the children. So Fathers who were engineers passed on that craft. Fathers who were joiners passed on that craft. Fathers who were plumbers passed on that craft. Do you understand? Their parents were passing on crafts. Mothers who were dressmakers passed on that craft. Knitters passed on that craft to their children. And that was historically how it happened, and from an oral tradition perspective. Anyway, I was just giving you an insight into my father. This is me. Roberta the Call is really going to give you insight into my father. I said my father came into this world. He came into this world with dignity, and he left it with dignity, is how I described it in a eulogy to him, because that's all he was. And what happened, it took me years to walk in my father's shoes, because I liked how he approached certain activities and development. I've had a lot of hardships in my life, like my father. My father didn't discover he was dyslexic till 61. I didn't discover till like 41. And I discovered because my father constantly was engaging in education, just like my mother. My mother's been engaging in lifelong learning, college, since she came in the 60s. My mother, I admire her until today. In 2017, my mother still goes to college. She believes in lifelong learning. If you hear what's stopping you from educating yourself, and she very much encourages people to engage in that. And I'm a person that very much did that also. Through their tenacity, what they showed me is that, son, you might have special education needs. At that time, it was called special education needs, slow learner people. That shouldn't stop you. So the quote my parents had basically simply this: don't let disadvantages be a barrier to learning. Maybe you have to put more work in. Maybe you have to be more creative. And that's what I did. But they didn't only just do that. My parents got me a specialist to work with me. Boom, boom, boom. A gentleman, when I started to work with him, he didn't have a master's. He was just doing his master's, called Sir Roy Blackman, which is very, very important for people to have an understanding. But with my parents, they worked back-to-back shifts for me to have private lessons. And I realized when I met some individuals that my private lessons, or the way my parents taught me, made a difference to my life. It enhanced my life in a way that other people's lives weren't enhanced. It gave me confidence, because I might have been a child with special education needs, but I was around some of the UK's biggest academics, and I saw how they went about their lives. I was around people who were movers and shakers, who didn't have qualifications, but they didn't stop at events. They didn't stop their qualifications, stop them from achieving what they wanted to do. So one of the key things I had as a special education needs learner, I had the skill of developing my confidence, which means I took time out to work on myself. I knew that, you know what, it's going to take me more time to do that. So I'll go home and spend time doing that. Do you understand? And what happened was, for example, the activities that built my confidence and gave me skills as a leader, manager, coordinator, producer, director, was dance and the arts and events management. These three things, and they're all connected, because through doing sports gave me a better athleticism, and dance gave me better athleticism for sports, and sports gave me better athleticism for dance. And when you start to learn about training, because both of them, sports and dance, require physical training, physical education. Now, one of the key things when you're in sports excellence, they teach you to try to learn as many different activities to develop your cardiovascular, to basically develop your training, because training gets boring, it can get rigorous. And when it gets rigorous, that's when you can cause injury. So if you make dance and sports and arts part of your lifestyle, it's better because you enjoy it more. When you have a lifestyle, you're doing loads of different activities that are holistically connected. So, for example, dance is the mother of all arts. Do you understand? It requires you to learn music, it requires you to learn art, it requires you to learn architecture. Do you understand? It requires you to learn theatre. It requires you to learn a lot of different things. So, example, a lot of people don't know I was a great musician at school. Musicianship, I've listened to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different albums. I've spent a lot of hours on hours and hours and hours listening to music, a whole genre, watching jazz tapes. I spent hundreds and hundreds of hours. For many years I did it, but between 05 and 10 at Oxford Brookes University, I spent most of my time just looking through jazz, constantly, to get the feel. 24/7, I always have something on because I wanted to get the feel of jazz. Because the idea of me being a dancer, a UK jazz dance pioneer, I'm not just a dancer, I'm a UK jazz dance pioneer. Where did I get that pioneering learning and thinking from? It's from my parents. Because in their day, it wasn't important just to dance. It was important to dance reflecting your personality and character, which had come from the music. Back in the day, it wasn't for a jazz musician to copy others. That wasn't seen as progressive. That wasn't seen as innovative. It was seen as shameless, actually. You have your own personality, character. Spend time with yourself. Spend time engaging in selfless practice, and you'll find your own learning, thinking, and development. Well, that's what our parents showed me. That's what my father did. It's very much, and my father was very much, spent a lot of time in selfless practice. So did my mom in the home. And then they passed on them values to us. They passed on them attitudes to us. They